Good morning. We'd like to welcome everyone to the Virginia Transit Association's webinar, Legislative Advocacy 101. What is advocacy and why does it matter? I'm Lisa Guthrie, the Executive Director of the Virginia Transit Association.
And I'm Danny Plugger. I'm handling policy communications and outreach for VTA.
We're recording this webinar and it'll be available on our website along with the slides for on-demand viewing later. We'll save all questions for the Q&A portion of the webinar until after the presentation. We, of course, encourage you to send your questions in anytime during the presentation, and this is how to do that. Look for the webinar panel on your screen and simply type your question into the question box. Although they'll be answered at the end of the webinar, you can submit your question anytime and we'll hold on to them. Remember that the audience is muted, so we'll be unable to hear you during the webinar.
So, thank you, Lisa. So what is an advocate? It is a person who publicly supports or recommends something, especially when it pertains to a policy or proposal. We have all advocated for something before, even if you didn't think that you were advocating for something. So think about it like this. I'm pretty sure that we all remember and love the classic movie A Christmas Story, right? Well, Ralphie is an advocate for the Red Ryder BB gun. He outlines why he wants it and what it means for him to his teachers, his parents, the store Santa Claus, and everybody and anyone who will listen. When it comes to transit, we all need to be an advocate and tell anyone who will listen the positive benefits of transit for our communities.
So why does becoming an advocate matter? Your overall goal is to build relationships so that decision makers, like elected officials and community leaders, will understand and appreciate the importance of transit. Activating community leaders to serve as transit advocates means that you amplify and expand the call for action without you as the sole voice speaking in your own self-interest.
So I wanted to give everybody an idea of where all the transit funding comes from. So I went through the Federal Transit Administration's National Transit Database and compiled all the data for our transit agencies. And this is an opportunity to give you an idea of why advocacy matters. So 25% of your funding comes from your customers in the way of fare box recovery. 31% comes from your local government, regional authorities, or your transportation planning organizations. 3% of your funding comes from other sources, such as advertising, etc. The last two sources are where VTA's role is absolutely vital. 20% of your funding comes from the state via the governor, the General Assembly, the Department of Rail and Public Transportation, and the Commonwealth Transportation Board. And the last 21% comes from federal sources, such as the President, Congress, FDA, the Federal Railroad Administration, or RTAP. So breaking down those numbers a little bit further, I kind of wanted to give an example of two different agencies on the spectrum, Hampton Roads Transit and Winchester Transit. As you can see, HRT gets 54% of their funding from local sources and the fare box, while Winchester Transit gets over 77% of their funding from state and federal sources. And all the other transit agencies are on the spectrum between these two. Nonetheless, every transit agency in Virginia gets some portion of state and or federal funding.
Now I want to go through some steps to success for legislative advocacy. So we're going to flesh this out a little bit more in a future slide, but I'm going to run through the bullets on what you need to be successful. You need to build your hometown team. You need to do your research about your community and your transit system. Data. Educate your team and prepare your ask and get ready to secure a response or a response to your ask or your request, and then follow up. So what is building your team? Bringing in stakeholders from your community, like representatives from the business community, educational institutions, hospitals, medical community, or housing. Don't forget to involve transit users and your employees or their labor representatives on your team. We've been very successful in utilizing hospitals and the local Realtors Association, very strong transit advocates, but only you can figure out who the stakeholders are in your community. Remember, there are many perspectives to the transit story. VTA can help you assemble your team. Just call on us and let us know, and we'll be happy to work with you or even come out to your community and meet with your team. Doing your research, what legislators represent, you have to figure out which legislators represent your service area. Where do they live? What committees do they serve on? And who contributes to their campaign?
Another step to success is data. You know, how many employees do you have, and what fields are they in? Do they work in your garage, in your operations? What is the average wage of your employees? Use VTA as a resource, and we'll provide transit impact profiles that will help you explain your story, such as how many trips or passengers do you serve annually. All of this data helps go towards selling your agency to your stakeholders and your elected officials. And so the next piece of item that we are working for our VTA members is the creation of transit impact profiles. And these will be going out hopefully at the end of October. These pieces can be used as leave behinds to your state and federal elected officials. They can be distributed to the public. They can be given to your local elected officials. All in all, they are meant to help make the local case for transit. And so these profiles will be generated from the annual agency data in the National Transit Database. And we're hoping to have them completed in a couple of weeks. We've heard back from the NTD that the data will be released in early to mid-October and pending no delays. But this is a great little item that you can hand out that helps sell your agency and tell your transit story.
Okay, next step in the steps to success is educating your team. Now, we don't know who all of our legislators are going to be for the 2020 General Assembly session because we have elections November 5th. All seats in the House of Delegates and the State Senate are up for election. But that doesn't mean you have to wait until later. You can begin assembling your team now of all those different community leaders we were talking about earlier. Bring your team together to your headquarters, brief your team on your objective for meeting with legislators, make sure everybody on the team is familiar with the issues ahead and tell their story about why transit is important to them and their organization. You might want to prepare some talking points and who is going to be the lead on which talking points in the meeting later with the legislators. Anticipate what arguments or pushback you might get from your elected officials and be prepared to respond to that. And along with the transit profiles that Danny mentioned, any other necessary materials that really put your transit system in a positive light. Prepare a packet for the legislator and their staff. And so later, we don't have our legislative objectives finalized for the 2020 session yet, but you'll hear from VTA later on that. So once you have that in January or leading up to that, in addition to telling your story, you can have your clearly defined what we call an ask, a request to support a bill, to support additional funding, whatever it is that we decide is our priority for the upcoming session. And be prepared to ask for a specific action and then get a response. Can we count on you, Delegate so-and-so, to support Bill 1234 when it comes up on the floor? And so they are quite skilled in dodging responses, but when you put it to them like that, you'll get some indication of whether there's a level of support there. Next, following up. Sometimes you have to use email, and that's fine. They're accustomed to that, legislators, but acknowledge that you appreciate that they took the time to meet with you out of their busy schedule and thank them. Also, if it's a positive positive image, like maybe you've taken a picture and you want to put that out on social media. Legislators love that positive publicity. So think about that, putting it out. I enjoyed our visit with Delegate so-and-so, put it out on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and they will appreciate the fact that you've circulated that around. So that puts you in a very positive light.
Some things to keep in mind. Every effort should be made for your team to meet with your legislator in the summer or fall before the General Assembly. During session, try to call or email to schedule a meeting in advance, but recognize that you may need to brief the legislator's staff, and they will convey the message to the legislator. Use proper titles, delegates and senator, dress properly, business attire, be succinct and respectful, don't argue, and remember the staff is important. They sometimes have a better handle on issues than the legislator who's dealing with everything from Medicaid and Medicare to transit and business, taxes, etc. And about the meeting, be prepared. State the issue and the desired outcome. Build your argument. Be open and friendly. Give the legislator and the staff a chance to agree. Don't argue. Give examples and be careful about your own body language. Relate transit to real people, to the folks who ride it, to the people who work in your garages or maintain your system. Don't apologize either. Stay on topic, and it's okay to say, I don't know, let me get back to you. And reach out to VTA if there's a question that you can't answer. We'll help you get the data that you need or get a response back to that legislator. Don't give up. Do a team debrief immediately after your meeting with the legislator and determine who will follow up and then do it. This is very important because touching the legislator multiple times reinforces the importance of the issue. And so we're about to attempt to play a video. This was done by the Massachusetts Cultural Council, and it's a great video on how to meet with your legislator. You can think about putting yourself in the role, in these roles. It's fairly quite easy. It's a short video, about 5 minutes.
As a citizen and volunteer on your local cultural council, you are the ideal advocate to convey the necessity of arts and culture in your community. You have the power to demonstrate the importance of the arts and to ask legislators and town officials for their support. The initial speaker should introduce the group to the scheduler.
How are you doing?
Very well.
Excellent. I'm Tracy Kennedy. I'm with the Bedford Cultural Council. We have a 1 o'clock meeting set up with Rep. Gordon.
Oh, sounds good. Okay, I'll get an name for you.
Excellent.
You will be directed to see your legislator or an aide if the legislator is unavailable.
Hi, I'm Mary. Hi, Mary. How are you? Good.
Be patient. Legislators have dozens of meetings each day. It's possible that the legislator may be running late or called away at the last minute. In some cases, you may be asked to meet with a staff member. Meeting with a staff member can be just as influential since staff carefully briefs the legislator on meetings and issues.
He's actually double booked then, I guess. He's in another meeting right now. But if you want, you can come in and talk to me until he gets back, and we can then pass on your concerns to him. Sure, we'd love to meet with you.
Address the legislator as either representative or senator. This is a courtesy that shows respect for the office.
It's nice to meet you, Representative Gordon.
It's nice to meet you too, Barbara.
Keep the introductions brief. Take just a minute to introduce yourself and explain why you volunteer on your local cultural council.
My name is Barbara Procha, and I'm chair of the Bedford Cultural Council. Actually, I'm involved in quite a few activities, and one of them is the Bedford Farmers Market, and we received a grant from the Bedford Cultural Council quite a few years ago.
My name is Jossie Burks Abbott. I'm a librarian by training and an aspiring writer.
Representative Gordon, do you have a personal connection with the arts?
I do.
After you have introduced yourself, thank the legislator for taking the time to meet with you. Then tell your 3 advocacy points that you have prepared. Be succinct. Legislators appreciate clarity and brevity.
I want to thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today. We're here to talk to you about the funding for the Massachusetts Cultural Council, which goes to support the arts and cultures, organizations, individuals, and projects that are used within our community.
Well, thank you for coming to talk about that.
The Bedford Cultural Council is made up of 9 community members, and last year we granted $5,621 to 16 projects within our community.
We are also proud of the projects that we have helped our community's young people learn and grow through the arts and culture. We selected that as one of our priorities.
Can you tell me about some of those projects?
If the legislator has questions, answer them briefly and return to your 3 advocacy points. Don't worry if you can't answer all of the questions right then and there. You can get the information that was requested and follow up after the meeting.
So what can I help you with?
Today, what we're looking for is your commitment to continue the funding for the Cultural Council.
Sometimes the legislator may not be receptive to your cause. Stay calm and stick to your advocacy points.
Bedford residents who, like the multicultural event, they like those kind of events. They like festivals. But there are other kind of more multi-generational and even community theater events they would like to see, and I think we could probably succeed in doing those if we had more money.
We'll do the best we can, but it may not be everything that you're looking for. I hope you understand.
We do, and we understand that you have a lot of hard decisions to make, and we wouldn't be here if we didn't feel so strongly about how important it is to just even have a small investment in the arts. It helps build community, it enriches our educational programs, and it fuels the local economy.
Well, it is from an economic driver perspective. You're absolutely right.
Invite the legislator to one of your next events or council-funded projects. Ask the legislator one more time to support local cultural council funding through the Massachusetts Cultural Council and provide your one-page LCC fact sheet with any other materials you'd like to share.
It's coming up on November 22nd. So if you're interested in attending, that's in the center of town.
When it's time to leave, be sure to thank the legislator for listening and for meeting with your group. Thanks for watching this video. Remember that when legislators understand your goals and accomplishments, it will be easier to advocate for increased funding for arts and culture in your community.
And a couple of things to keep in mind. Our members of the House are called delegates, not representatives. It's different from state to state. And 3 advocacy points for transit are, who you are, what is the community impact of your transit agency, and what do you need? And so keep those 3 things in mind when you meet with your legislator, hopefully this upcoming General Assembly. And so included in this slide that you can write down are some key advocate resources that we've included for you to help you on your journey. Who is my legislator? That's a great website to figure out who your local elected officials are if you don't know if you don't know already. You can also kind of find out who your elected officials are for your entire transit agency, which ones touch your district or vice versa. The Virginia Public Access Project is a great resource to find out who's donating to the various candidates in your area, what interests are involved, maybe somebody who has contributed to your legislator, and maybe they can talk about transit in their conversations. And then the Legislative Information Services, LIS, is a fantastic resource to track pieces of legislation. And that's what VTA uses to track the different bills that impact our transit agencies across the state. One final resource, during the General Assembly, legislators love to get calls and letters. And so we've included an opportunity for a sample mailing address and how to address your senator or delegate. Always say, dear senator or delegate. And then lastly, use your advocacy tools. We have an action plan, the Advocacy Network, the Transit Action Network. You can sign up if you haven't done so already at vatransit.com/action. Please share that with your board members and with your local community volunteers. It's self-subscribed, so please share it and have them sign up. And then the second item at vatransit.com, is our impact profile for the statewide transit. We call it Moving Virginians and Our Economy, and it goes over all the different items of how transit impacts, who is served, what are the economic and environmental opportunities. And so it's a great resource and will be part of your leave behind when you meet with your legislators.
Okay, so we are now at the Q&A portion of our webinar. You can continue to send in questions until the end of this Q&A, and we'll see if we have any questions at this point. We have one question, okay. You mentioned putting together a stakeholder team. How many team members should we try to recruit? We would say maybe 3 to 4 different individuals to make up your team, representatives from the business community, perhaps the realtors, educational institutions. Who is likely to need transit for their everyday operations, getting people to work or getting people to school or from different housing organizations? Think about who in your community would serve in that capacity. We're looking for more questions. At this point, we don't have any others that have come in. This is your last chance. Okay. Again, I want to emphasize that VTA stands ready to help you with this. We can help you make appointments with your legislators, come to your transit system for meeting with your community stakeholder team, but we need you to reach out to your community because we don't know the people where you live. You do. So we can help you with that, but we need to partner. Oh, we do have a question here. Okay.
The question is, will you share any contacts so we can build a team? We certainly will, but a lot of your team should be from your local area. And so when we do have contacts, we'll be glad to share them, our local contacts. But think about, in respect to your own transit agency, who benefits, who's served, who your employees are. Having a representative of your employees is a great one as well, because a lot of folks, when they think transit, they think only about the actual transportation operation. They don't think about the mechanics who are changing the tires and the oil and what that means for the economy in your local area. Bills and laws that are in the pipeline that affect transit.
We are still working on our legislative agenda. We have some very specialized efforts this year that we hope will increase ridership, but those have not been finalized yet. And as soon as they are, certainly by our November board meeting, which all of our members are invited to, we'll be sharing some of that. But at this point, just setting up a meeting with your team and talking about the importance of transit to the community and how important the funding streams are to keep operations and capital afloat. Okay. All right. Well, with that, it looks like that's going to wrap it up for us. We want to thank you all for participating today, and we hope that you'll also join us for a sequel to this webinar as we get closer to the General Assembly session that begins in January. We're thinking maybe this will be Legislative Advocacy 102, and we'll think about maybe offering that in late November or December. We also hope that you'll plan to join us in Richmond for Legislative Advocacy Day and our evening reception. That's going to be on Monday, January 27th, and all of our members are invited to that as our guests. And that's going to be at Main Street Station again, and we'll have an additional feature this year with GRTC offering a Pulse tour. Our BRT in Richmond called the Pulse, so that's an added feature this year. More information about Legislative Day will be coming out later this fall, and we will put it on our website, vatransit.com. And with that, we again want to thank you all for joining us today, and thank you for being a transit advocate. Goodbye.